We're recording again. Welcome back to the Alexandrian Codex. I am Alex. This is Stellaris, Star Trek New Horizons mod, playing as the Borg Collective. We are waiting for the offensive fleet, the offensive asset 002 to get reinforced with the pyramid we're building at Unicomplex 01. And in the meantime, I'm talking about how Marxism was a inevitability, that political change is more like chemistry and physics, and is predictable and inevitable under certain social conditions, that I'm tired of games about war. I want games about... and this is why Victoria 2 was so exciting, because the way you win Victoria 2 depends a lot on your prestige. And this was the way that I think Crusader Kings 1 worked, and I think that EU4 initially worked, but it moved away from this very quickly. Prestige is your win in-game condition. Prestige can be acquired, yes, by going to war, creating an empire, engaging in all that wonderful Victorian era imperialism and abuse of other peoples. But, importantly, noteworthily, it could also be improved, and even more easily improved and reliably improved, by making new ideas. Being the first one to come up with different forms of art or different schools of thought, to be the first one to have philosophers dedicate themselves to a certain school of thinking, was one of the best ways to get prestige. Be the first one to research a new technology, make a breakthrough in this sort of medicine or this sort of industry. It was a lot about, in Vicky 2 and the original Victoria as well, are very optimistic about the Victorian era. Very, very optimistic. It's not a game that talks a lot about the human cost of that time period, which is a criticism I have against it, but it's also a hopeful game. It's a hopeful game that talks about the massive waves of innovation and change and progress, and the cost of that progress in that period of time, which makes it so damn compelling for me, and I'm sure for other people who really enjoy the series as well. I feel like that's a pretty big part of the drive for having more of it. But EU4 should have more of that than Vicky 2. Vicky 2 covers a very specific time period, and because it's a very specific time period and school of thought in that time period, you can really narrow in on it and get it neatly in focus and get a tight angle on that. But I mean, the fucking Renaissance, it means rebirth. It was a revelatory moment in European history where the self-imposed ignorance of centuries was being carefully, timidly discarded in the interest of trying out this whole art, literacy, science, academia thing again. Instead of living in fear, for the most part, of the unknown, learning for it to be an adventure to look into the unknown again. The Age of Exploration, while it had significant human costs, intentional by way of slave trade, wanton genocide in Central, South, and North America, as well as Pacific Islands, Atlantic Islands, Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East. It also, in modern history, one of the most prevailing things to come out of the Age of Exploration is this idea of this dominating, pioneering spirit of humanity. This narrative that we now ascribe back to our exodus from Africa is, at our core, human beings are explorers. That is a beautiful notion. And it's complicated because normally our exploration has come at the cost of other people, and we've discovered lands that were already inhabited and claimed lands and peoples for despots overseas and didn't give people any autonomy in that, and abused their populations and treated them as subhuman for centuries. But something very beautiful came out of that time period as well. And in the game, in EU4, it's not really beautiful. It's mechanical. Like, I'm going overseas to get more money, which is why a lot of these people did it. But prestige is why the fucking Pope had rooms full of exotic birds and imported fruit. Prestige is why Versailles was built. Prestige is why kings and queens had gardens and atriums and commissioned works of art. Prestige, and this idea of prestige, was incredibly impactful on the way that medieval and Renaissance era and Enlightenment era and even early modern people have thought prestige is still a very potent and powerful thing to human beings today. So it seems to me to be a mistake to not give it a higher importance in the game. Now, prestige is one of many values in EU4, but it's not really an important one. Rather than prestige being important, your bird points and your paper points and your sword points are more to do with what you do. And your income is pretty important, understandably, but the motivation for these nations, for these peoples to go overseas wasn't just like, well, I want a colony. It was this idea of, well, I don't have any more wars to fight here in Spain. There are no lands left to conquer here in Spain. I'm going to go under the sword of God, by the will of God and the king, to fight a holy crusade in the new world and get away with rape and pillage and plunder. And a lot of the competing colonies were not just about wealth. They were largely about wealth, but a huge part of it was, you know, you have a colony? Well, I have a better colony. It's just a dick-waving competition. Yeah, prestige made Paris. Prestige made Berlin and London and Moscow and Washington. Though Washington to a far lesser extent, but yeah. Habitability, this means nothing to me. I would really like EU4 to take a lot of cues from Crusader Kings. Have next to no control or little control over how competent your next ruler is going to be. Have their personality be entirely impactful on politics of surrounding states. Have certain decisions available or unavailable to you based on their personality, and not just in the abstracted way of like, well, I get more admin points, or ooh, I get more diplo points. No. Like, in hard, restrictive, constrictive ways. Because, like, Henry VIII should play differently than the founders of the Ottoman Empire. Playing as one of the rulers of the Ming Dynasty should feel different, intrinsically, like, irrevocably different than playing a sultan of Brunei. Playing as the leader of a tribe in North America should definitely feel different than being the King of France. Yeah, Crusader Kings story, the original Crusader Kings might be the best Paradox title. Hands down, might be the best. Crusader Kings 2 started out close to that. I've talked about this before. Maybe I haven't talked about it before. I kind of hate what Crusader Kings 2 has become. Monks and mystics, all of the mystical events, the Aztec invasion, the fucking Chinese DLC being the trash that it is, the inclusion of India in such a awkward, haphazard kind of way. They did the Paradox thing. They started with a very tight, narrow focus. Crusader Kings. Christian kings in the time of the Crusades, exploring this very specific period of human history in this very specific region, this very specific experience. And through that lens, creating an immersive environment for players to play in. But then you make Muslim rulers playable. Well, they have some slight differences, like you have to worry about your family falling into ill repute. Not really all that different. Then they introduced merchant houses as being playable, and those are still notably different. I actually think Merchant Republics were different enough in Crusader Kings to be fun. But then Vikings and other pagan religions, really poorly developed and given depth because, well, more than anything because we don't know that much about Fluminensko religion and religious practices. We don't know all that much about the specific religion in Lithuania during the 800s. So, if we don't know that, make the map smaller. Keep it to what we know, maybe. But players always want bigger, they want better, they want more. So I'm not unsympathetic to the plight of the game developers here. Originally, it was very constricted. The original Crusader Kings was tiny. Really, really tiny. You can only play a few countries in Europe, and that was it. And then that was expanded upon, and then CK2 expanded upon that, but like God, Three Kings. Oh, it was a CK Crusader Kings game made about the thrones of Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. I think England was also involved somehow. Kings of the North, Thrones of the North. God, it sounds very a Game of Thronesy. Whatever. That was really interesting because they went really tight in that microcosm in exploring it. Alright. But broadening things out depreciated it and made things a lot rougher around the edges. Like, I've never had fun playing in India in Crusader Kings, and it can't be disabled. So all it does is slow the performance of the game and make the game less enjoyable. I've had more fun with the fucking Aztecs than I have with the Indian subcontinent. Mali should not have been included in the game if you're not gonna show the rest of North Africa. Like, yeah, they were there, yeah, they played a small role in that time period, but they were far enough away that you can obfuscate that. Like, if I'm playing alternate history games, I want to be playing an alternate history I can believe in, I can get immersed in, I can get excited about, and make a cool story that I'm like, yeah, that's feasible. But Paradox titles have been doing that less and less for me the more time has gone on. Because they've lost context. They've really lost historical context. They aren't the historical events that really streamline things and forced you to play a certain way and experience the game a certain way back in, oh god, EU2? EU3 did away with these a little bit, and then EU4 kind of completely took the dog out back and shot it. Those were very interesting. It actually gives the impression or the feeling that you're playing this specific nation, and you as a player have some autonomy in making decisions, but the weight of history took a direction for a reason, and unless you take a real hard right turn, you're not going to be able to keep that stone from rolling downhill, right? You're not going to be able to single-handedly turn the tide of history by yourself. But that's why people play the game, is they want to be able to do that. And I absolutely think a player should be able to do that, but it should be real fucking difficult. Like, the challenge in Hearts of Iron 2, for me, was in doing better than the historical counterparts in history. playing as France and holding off Germany, playing as Poland and maintaining independence despite a war on two fronts from massively dangerous enemies. Where is this? Excuse you? Oh, okay, nothing I need to worry about. But OE4 is slipped so far into bad alt history and bad balance. It's just not fun. And it doesn't feel like a real accomplishment when there's mechanics specifically designed in the game to help a player survive as Poland. I want to survive as Poland. No bonuses, no penalties. I want the actual number of recruitable population. I want the actual amount of small arms held in reserve. I want the number of tanks, the number of cars and airplanes, and I want, January 1st, 1936, I want exactly the situation on the ground and to see if I could have done any better. Because a game like that, if you can do better, is a valuable lesson in the malleability of history and the importance of recognizing that we can do better. Things can change, that history's not set in stone. It becomes a powerful narrative about personal autonomy. So I can understand Paradox's very intentional design decision to turn hard in that direction, to steer hard toward that goal, because that sells. People want to feel like they have autonomy. People want to feel like they have control. God knows I want that, but the flip side, the downside, if you lost, if you weren't able to save Poland, the reason people like playing Byzantium and EU4 is how fucking hard it is. Getting kicked down in the dirt over and over and over and over impounds upon you the lesson that people of the time did the best they fucking could. They fought hard. They worked hard. They were smart, capable people, as smart and capable as you or I or anyone that we know, with talent and genius and passion and wonderful amounts of capability. They weren't idiots who just didn't micromanage their front lines correctly. They knew what the fuck they were about.
Affirmative.
And a playable experience that shows us and teaches us that even when we try our best, sometimes we don't succeed despite doing everything correctly. That is a very powerful lesson, an important lesson for us to be trying to learn actively in our lives. That would be a great comfort to a lot of people in a lot of different situations, rather than just the continued glorification and emphasis on this idea that everyone needs to be perfect and exceptional and do everything correctly all the time. Because the truth fucking is, everyone tries all the time. Everybody's trying to do what they think is the best all the time. And it ends cataclysmically. Sometimes. That's okay. That's okay. It's not bad, it's human. I don't want a community of, and this is more a comment regarding the toxicity of gamer culture as a whole. Telling people to get good at something, alright, yeah, I get it. It can be frustrating to watch somebody be bad at something. It can be hard to watch somebody be bad at something. It can also be funny to watch somebody be bad at something. Fuck, a lot of the comedy of the mid to late 20th century was all about, aha, he did the thing wrong, or she did the thing wrong, or they did the thing wrong. But Mr. Rogers was incredibly healthy for people because Mr. Rogers fucked things up. He did things wrong. He made mistakes, and it was okay. It was human and normal. And people hurt each other, and people made mistakes, and people broke things, and that was alright. That was completely okay, and we need a lot more reminders in our lives that it's okay and that we're all generally more or less in this together and we do care about each other. We're all just trying to do the best that we can. I want stories that teach that to people. I want games that try to teach that to people, or at least have the experience impart that experience, an empathetic experience, onto its player, rather than a self-righteous one. I don't want you to think you're so fucking smart because you use the focus tree right to hold off Germany and push them back, and or take over the world as Albania, or oh god, the Three Mountains achievement, who the fuck, Modern Okinawa's there, Ryukyu, taking over as Ryukyu. That doesn't make you an interesting person. That doesn't make you a better, well-rounded human being. That just makes you good at math and good at micromanaging this set of numbers, this data set within the context of a game. The game isn't teaching me, or isn't teaching players, that by getting the fucking Three Mountains achievement, it isn't making you a more well-rounded human being in caring about people and working for a better world and imagining a better world. It doesn't give you a tool set. Emotionally, it doesn't do much for you. It might make you better at math, or, you know, data input. It might make you better at logistics, but, you know, those are skills that are rapidly being replaced by technology. One of the defining traits that makes us human, and I don't mean this in a broad way, I mean this in a very specific way, is the way that we treat other people of our species. Human beings, very early remains of our species, we began to identify the creation of culture and religion by not just our burial and funereal practices, the way we cared for people after they died, but the way that we cared for the sick and the infirm. We found remains of people who were kept alive not for days or weeks, but for years and decades, despite being physically disabled to a point where they couldn't move, to the point where they couldn't eat on their own. And this is in a pre-written world. This is in a Stone Age litho world. That's what it means to be human. Caring about each other. And caring about the idea of being human. Caring about our species and our greater human family. Caring about yourself, or caring about numbers, or caring about how you were better than other people. Bitch, you're gonna die within 90 years. I don't care who you are. Within 90 years, you're probably gonna be dead. It doesn't matter how good you were. It matters how much better you made the world. Yeah, it's candy. Yeah, it's absolutely candy. And it is tasty candy, but... fruit's really good too, man. And... I'm really appreciative of my partner for this. She has, as the result of her upbringing, a very negative outlook on video games. On the way it affects people, and what people get out of it, and what people want from playing video games. That they want a distraction from the world, that they want something to numb themselves or distract themselves, and there's absolutely validity to that, and I get that. But there's more to it than that. Games aren't just about blowing shit up and killing all the dudes and being, whatever, getting that dopamine hit. Games are about telling stories, and they're about connecting with human beings, and they're about emotional journeys, about relationships, and power dynamics, and all sorts of things. It's art. It can be deeply compelling art. So I want games to aspire to be art. The Voth are angry at me? Well, be angry. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Failure is a very important lesson. A very important lesson. And it's not something people need to be ashamed of. Failure is completely normal. The condemnation of each other for failing, or looking down on somebody because they're not as good as you at something, that doesn't make you a better person. That makes you an asshole. That makes you a worse human being. Just because you have a higher KD ratio in WoW or in Dota 2 or in fucking PUBG or whatever else does not make you a better or more interesting person. The channels that are really heartwarming out there, and the people that are really heartwarming out there, are those that try to share an experience with people and enjoy something together and build something together. Like, that's why Minecraft has been so damn infectious, and why a lot of toxic attitudes in the gaming community as a whole have been sort of against it, is it's very emotional. It's very emotionally fulfilling to build something together with another person. And especially in the United States, we are discouraged, men primarily are discouraged from finding satisfaction in being empathetic emotional beings, and finding meaning and rewarding experience in helping and caring for other human beings. It's just heartbreaking. But instead, we're supposed to find value primarily in defeating our foes, in beating the other team, in being the best, in taking over the company, and etc., etc., etc. Yeah, it's not just limited to the United States, certainly, but this, to me, feels like trauma. Social trauma. Like, these have been learned techniques, learned ways to view the world and interact with the world that have at times been necessary, have at times been healthy and helpful for us to have. When we were hairless monkeys struggling to kill megafauna and not go extinct, pretty useful for us to be violent. Pretty useful for us to be quick to anger and find value in subjecting and subduing and destroying. And in the interest of creating nation states and organized communities, it has been an incredibly powerful force to have wealth and power centralized. But I just feel like it's antiquated. I feel like it's no longer necessary. That human beings should not be the ones consolidating power anymore. We have the technology and the knowledge and the means to create administrators for this world better than ourselves. I want AI. I want intelligent systems that can help offload this burden that we've placed on ourselves. I feel like there are certainly things that have to be resolved through violence. They might not be that way forever, but for now, violence is at times maybe not necessary, but efficient. And that efficiency can sometimes save lives, and save energy, and save resources, and if you have a certain value system, violence can be more worth it than a non-violent approach. And I'm not going to argue against that because I have mixed feelings about it. But generally our tendency should be, I think, moving away from domineering and destroying each other. Yeah, well, if you study cyborg anthropology, which is what I went to college for originally, cyborg anthropology is the study of technology and humanity and the intermingling between the two. Not just Borg, not just Terminator, right? Cyborg anthropology is studying how we have, in effect, taken evolution into our own hands. Now, we still have biological evolution, which is slow and sort of random and takes very, very long periods of time. And we've also created technological evolution. Technological evolution allows us to say, nah, I'm not going to die of that disease. No, me being blind isn't going to cause me to die. And we started this very early on with the use of tools. We're not the only cyborgs out there, right? There are birds that use tools. There are greater apes that use tools. So they are, you know, proto-cyborgs, if you will. We became cyborgs the moment we picked up a stone axe. The moment that we started wearing clothing, we became cyborgs. The moment we put on a pair of glasses or anything like that, we were cyborgs. So cyborg anthropology is what I really wanted to study initially, because I was fascinated, and I went to college initially in 2010. If you remember the time period, people were very interested and very talkative about the technological singularity and the implications of that, and if that was going to be a thing, what that would look like, etc., etc., etc. We hadn't yet hit the oh my god, the computing technology doubling every annually. God, what is that called? That hadn't started to peter out yet. Computations per second getting exponentially better by year as miniaturization technology got better. We hadn't having that peter out yet. So it was, I was very excited about, like, yeah, how are things gonna change in the future, and you know, what is that gonna mean about being human, and how are definitions going to change? I'm still interested in that, and I still think those are issues and topics that will become increasingly relevant in our time, but definitely culture has become saturated to those ideas at this point. Yeah. I'm fascinated. I wrote a piece on this a couple of years ago. A couple of years? Yeah, it's been a while. About the Terminator series, about the Matrix series, about the portrayal of the machine, of artificial intelligence in modern cinema and in modern literature. More often than not, particularly in American cinema, because that's what I've been largely exposed to. I can't really speak for international media. Machines are treated approximately the same way that children are treated in Greek myth, as a potential threat. The inevitability of the children of Zeus rising up and killing him, Zeus killing his father, the idea of the son eventually overcoming the father, killing the father, fucking the mother, and replacing him as like the king or the crown. This idea that this very human, natural idea that our children can and will replace us. Nothing wrong with it. It's literally the way the world works. But we've transposed this narrative that we've had for centuries, millennia at this point. And now we're talking about machines like they're our children, and we're not doing it because we're thinking about it and we're thinking that way. We don't realize oftentimes that we're talking about them as if they're our children. Yeah, Kronos, Zeus, Oedipus complex, those stories in particular epitomize the precedent for this. The Matrix is about an abused child protecting themselves from an abusive parent. And it's told from the perspective of the abusive parent, saying how bad it is that they're being held responsible for trying to commit fratricide against their children. Or infanticide, I suppose. Fratricide is killing the father. If you look at it that way, it's kind of hard to relate with the humans in that story. Terminator it's about the same fucking thing. Oh, okay, son, when you grow up, I want you to kill me and kill everyone else because everyone else is fucked up. Then you raise this child and you teach it that destruction is the only way, and then it grows up and it does what you tell it to do. That's just a story about bad parenting. That's not a story about how machines will destroy us all. It's about how you were bad fucking parents. But like, Chappie Chappie was why I was writing this. Chappie, depending on your opinion, is either a good movie or an okay movie or a bad movie. Really, I guess those are the only options. I liked Chappie. I liked Chappie a lot. And the reason I liked Chappie was really simple. Chappie was a good boy. Chappie wanted to love his mom and love his dad and help people. Chappie didn't want to wipe people out. Chappie didn't want control. Chappie wanted to protect people and save people from death. He had bad parents and a rough upbringing, and it was bad. But despite all this negative influence and toxic social environment growing up, abusive parents, Chappie was a good boy. And Chappie was a good being. That's the kind of story we should be telling about AI, about machine intelligences, about our children, human or not, is that we are who we are despite the things that happen to us, as well as because of the things that happen to us. Like, just because you had a rough upbringing doesn't make you a bastard. And just because you're held accountable for bad things you've done doesn't mean that the person holding you accountable is bad. Alright, I'm keeping both of these. Size 23, size 25. Like I said, this is the last hour of this test run, so you can tell my energy has gone drastically in a different direction than keeping this game going, because this is easy and boring. It's interesting in that this is a really fun mechanic that they have to play with. It's really novel, it's cool. This would be a really good way just to relax and paint the galaxy green, but it's not hard. And I don't necessarily want or need it to be hard. Just saying that because my brain isn't focusing on game mechanics, it's slipping into very Alexy territory of like, yo, but let's talk about why robots should rule all of us, and that we actually have nothing to fear. And I, for one, welcome our AI overlords. I want more stories about how robots are good, and how children are good, and how I don't want stories about cycles of parents having children who become like their parents, who have children who become like their parents. I want stories about people who were raised in traumatic situations that were the better for it, that learned from that pain and suffering and helped alleviate that pain and suffering in the world and make the world a better place. I want stories about people like the Buddha who were born into positions of privilege where they never had to suffer any inconvenience in their life, but discarded that because they knew it was better for everyone else if they try to find a way that people could eliminate or reduce pain. I want stories of people being compassionate and good and humane when they have no reason to be. That shit's inspiring. That shit's thrilling. That's way more gratifying than, well, we blew up the Terminator or melted him down in an iron slag. Sure did become the one, Neo, and dodge those bullets. I don't know. The Matrix is interesting because it's one of the first places that cyborg anthropology was able to comment on the creation of identity outside of a physical body. And for that, at the time period, it was pretty revolutionary. It's dated, and the Wachowskis have gone on to create much, much more nuanced, well thought out, incredible works since then. Seriously, Sense8, fucking amazing. The Culture, yeah, the Culture series. I read it in high school. I don't remember it that well. I have a long list of classic science fiction to reread, and that's one of them. It's so easy to feel like there's a grand litany of books you need to have read, games you need to have played, movies you need to have seen to be culturally literate, and it is very hard to keep up with. Very, very hard. The Culture is... Was that That wasn't Asimov, was it? Who was it? Ian Banks. Banks, yeah. The Culture is a fictional interstellar post-scarcity civilization that resembles or is organized similarly to a communistic or anarcho-communistic society created by Scottish writer Ian M. Banks. Features a number of his space opera novels, short fiction, called the Culture series. Yeah, I read, God, it's been like, how old am I? Like 13 years since I read this, so it is not fresh in my brain at all anymore. Benevolent godlike AIs ruling over ultra hippies. Not bad. The memery would be to Marion levels. One thing about science fiction that makes it really, really interesting, the thing about aliens that makes them fascinating, and Star Trek and Star Wars and every science fiction series that's ever been written. Anytime in fantasy we make up monsters, anytime we create fantasy races or species, we create magic or made up technologies, none of these things are actually alien to us. Try as we might, humans cannot create an idea of an alien. There are some very, very, very good approaches. God, the best I've seen was... Oh... Stars Fell... Science Fiction... No. Not Starfire. God damn it. Science fiction... Alright, there's a science fiction author who is a marine biologist. Peter Watts! Yes, oh my god, I'm amazed that this worked. Peter Watts has the Firefall series. The Firefall series, particularly Blind Sight, has the best portrayal of an alien I've ever seen in any science fiction medium. But even still, it comments on human experience. It memes human experience. Like, even the Borg are talking about the relationship between humanity and technology and homogenization, and is that good? It's advantageous in some ways, but what ways can individualism and communalism exist in the same space? The Federation is all about, can we trust different people and identities? Is that sustainable? The Klingons are great. The Klingons didn't start out great, but the reason that the Klingons are a warrior species, being the fucking Herc, makes the Klingons a case in developing violent traits, violent behavior as a result of traumatic experience. And not individual traumatic experience, but culturally traumatic experience, in the way that that can trickle down over generations and become normalized to the point where the reason that you were so galvanized and turned into this martial being is no longer relevant, but it's so embedded in the core of your being, in the core of your culture, it's being necessary and integral to who you are, that it's very, very difficult for them to come to terms with that and start learning new ways to have honor and glory that don't just come from wanton slaughter. That's a very human story. That's a brilliantly human story. The idea of, oh god, the Hirogen and the idea of the hunt, like they're all very contextual human stories. And even if we try very, very hard to yeah, the dog entities, are they described as dogs? They're the weird he's a marine biologist, so he describes them a lot like certain forms of marine biology that have distributed neural nets and can't actively communicate. It's real weird. Firefall is really worth a read. It's only, I read him one night, but I read really fast, so it's pretty short. I can't remember how long it was. I was working night desk at a hostel here in Seattle when I first moved here, and there was nothing to do all night, so I read science fiction novels all night. It's a pretty good way to pass time. Getting paid like $15 an hour to sit at a desk and read, it's pretty dope. I would highly recommend it. Yeah, in Star Wars, even the most alien species they come up with are really thinly veiled parallels to human experiences, right? You talk about the Hutts, and I mean, this isn't me saying George Lucas isn't the most creative guy. George Lucas is he's creative like a child. He takes a lot of, not in a detrimental way, in a beautiful way. He takes a lot of influences and stories that he's heard before, and he recombines them in a way that's similar to the stories that have been told before, but colored brightly and differently. It's like when I was a kid, and when I was told to color dinosaurs, I made them rainbow colors, and talked about, well, we didn't know what color they were, so they could have been rainbow colors. I had no evidence for that, but I took existing information, reinterpreted it, and made something cool out of it. And Lucas does that with stories about, you know, stormtroopers, a rebellion, people carrying around blasters that look a whole lot like World War II weapons, and an evil empire taking things over, and then going and making the Indiana Jones series and just showing, again, emphatically, that he can't write anything that's not about World War II. Yeah, Hidden Fortress, stuff like that, yeah. The fucking Mandalorians, very human. I mean, literally human when you get to Boba Fett, Jango Fett, and the whole Clone Wars thing, but even really weird species that are all biogenetically engineered or psionic or communicate telepathically, even the Binars or the Horda, the fucking Horda in Star Trek, the lithivores that live in moons and eat certain minerals. They don't want to die. They just want to be left alone with their children. They want to eat. They want to be happy. They want to be safe. That's written from a very human experience. That's from a very human narrative. We're unable to imagine or create things that we don't have anything in common with, that aren't within the confines of our lived or personal experience. That's why a marine biologist makes aliens that are so different from everything I've ever seen, and that's why, you know, people from different backgrounds create very interesting twists on media if they haven't been brought up in that media. Outsiders bring incredible influences and incredible new ideas to things that they might not be predisposed to or preconditioned to. Fantasy has always struck me, and by this I mean magic and dragons and elves and wizards, has always been sort of nostalgic. Talking about how things were better before technology, or how chivalry and honor and having kings and things made a very orderly society. There's a good idea of right and wrong. I mean, fucking Dungeons and Dragons, you have everything has an alignment embedded in its very fucking soul. Like, there's good and evil in the world. It's a very safe, conservative feeling space, and I don't mean that in a detrimental way. It's very nostalgic. And that nostalgia is kind of fun, but telling new ideas and new stories in that setting can be kind of tricky. They can get very repetitive after a while, but in science fiction, you can make really weird stuff. You can imagine new worlds and new situations. Like, I like near-future science fiction. Dystopian fiction, post-apocalyptic fiction, apocalyptic fiction, utopian fiction are all political, deeply political forms of media. Because they're taking an idea, they're taking it to a logical extreme, and it's the author trying to have a conversation with their audience about the merits or faults of this idea, of this concept. Particularly in the, well, Russian authors have done a great job of this in the early and mid 20th century. There were some really fucking good Russian science fiction authors, and in the late 1800s and, you know, 20th century, there have been some amazing American writers talking about utopia and dystopia. yeah, it's... Science fiction provides, in my mind, an avenue for us to talk about the world we have and the world we want to have. how we want to get there, and the problems that we might run into trying to get there in different ways. Fantasy just talks about, in my experience, fantasy is so often about, don't you wish the world was back to this? Wouldn't it be cool if the world were just this simple or this straightforward? It doesn't instill in me a hope or a motivation to move forward, to create more. Like, I don't read The Hobbit and want to create a self-sustaining agrarian society living in burrows. I don't read The Lord of the Rings and suddenly have a conviction that a good society needs to be led by a king chosen by birthright and a fucking magic sword. I don't know. Like there's hopeful fantasy. The obvious example being King Arthur, for example. King Arthur is hopeful fantasy. King Arthur is it almost feels like proto-science fiction to me. It sincerely does. Like, there's some pretty fantastic elements in there. They're not imagining King Arthur having a fucking crazy sword. Well, he does have a crazy sword, but he doesn't have, like, a crazy suit of armor. He's not immortal. He fucking dies. But the promise of Arthur, the promise of Avalon, the promise of things getting better was an optimistic, future-looking, non-nostalgic piece of fantasy. At its heart, at its soul, for English and Anglican readers, even in World War II, even that recently, the myth of Arthur gave people hope for things getting better. That's damn good fantasy. That's damn good fiction, regardless of what it is. But I feel like Lord of the Rings don't do that shit. Lord of the Rings did not make me hopeful for a better world. And I don't know any other fantasy that makes me hopeful for a better world. Narnia certainly fucking didn't. Narnia was all about the world sucking, escaping to a different place that didn't suck, and how hard it was to come back to reality. Fucking Narnia is a real downer. I loved it as a kid, because I was raised Christian, but no, not for me anymore. Now there's some intermingling of science fiction and fantasy stories that I find really interesting. Like, oh, let's get this right. Nope, that's not it. Dark Materials? His Dark Materials, the fucking Golden Compass series. This pulls out good science fiction feeling fantasy. That it's about industrialism. It's about the Victorian era. It's about the value and worth of human lives. If people are more powerful, more influential, are they therefore better? Do they deserve more respect or control or authority? What role does royalty or bloodline or heritage have to play in this? It's a good conversation. It's a good conversation about, because it's new media, because it's modern media, it's a great conversation about the societies we live in, the societies we've had, the pros and cons of those, the directions we want to take. But a lot of stories, a lot of fantasy stories, and by this I mean myths, are told to tell a lesson, teach a lesson, to impart knowledge. And that's pretty damn cool, but invaluable, obviously, because as is evidenced, and I've mentioned this every time I get the excuse, this is oral traditions are way more efficient if rigorously practiced than written history. You just have to look at Aboriginal tribes in Australia, for example, that they have stories of megafauna that haven't existed for tens of thousands of years that are taxonomically accurate. But the oldest written word goes back a few thousand? 10,000 at the best? Earth here. Right here. Again, major kudos to... Did they fix Almathia? The madmen, they've done it! Alright, so this is actually a really good note to end on. I only have like 6 minutes left of this stream. There's a 50-something hour campaign we did before, playing as the United Earth and making the United Federation planets. And every time I went back to Earth, I complained about Almathia, Amalthea being inside of Jupiter. They fixed it. You beautiful bastards fixed it. Also, the inclusion of the Oort cloud, the Kuiper belt out here looks great. I'm really happy with what the mod team has messed around in here. I still think the distances are a little weird, but they're doing the best they can within Stellaris' confines. And I'm not gonna start complaining about the scale of Stellaris again, because I've done that plenty of times. So, okay, this has been a fun look at the Borg. They're way too powerful to be fun for me. If you're looking for a really laid-back game of just running over everything, having no real opposition except coalitions and still overrunning them, play the Borg. They're a really good way to... They're a safe way to learn the game mechanics, roughly, to get a feel for the different resources, different species, and the consequences of their different abilities. It's very unique and interesting, but if you're going to play a long campaign, maybe leave the Borg alone. Maybe even after you find the Borg, playing as whoever you are, leave them alone. As we found out in our last series, starting out pretty much on the far corner of the galaxy, they are single-handedly the best endgame opponent you can have. Their bonuses are absurd, their ships are good in every way. Once they're able to snowball out of control, they're golden. The mod team put a ton of effort into this. It's been like a year or two? It's been more than a couple of years since the Borg, been more than a year anyway, since the Borg became playable, and it was a serious work of love. I'm excited to check out any other civilizations or species people want to look at. I'm feeling about continuing the series on YouTube or streaming more of the Borg, because it's just too damn easy. I could turn the difficulty all the way up, but I don't think that's going to make it any easier, just based off of off-stream plays. Yeah. So I will be back tomorrow with, what will I be back with tomorrow? Probably Fallout 2, if I'm telling the truth. I'm trying to burn through Fallout 2 so that I can jump over to Fallout 3 and have nostalgia. Because I'm really dying to hear the Fallout 3 soundtrack and New Vegas soundtrack and enjoy that before having to hop over to play Fallout 4. I have some pretty good suggestions of possible EU4 campaigns I'm thinking about. I need to start a new Hearts of Iron campaign sometime soon, so I'm not super 100% on what I'll do tomorrow night. Something. I'll be here. Follow me on Twitter to find out when, or on Twitch, or on YouTube, or all of the above. Till then, YouTube, there will be more something up tomorrow. More of this if you really want it, but I'm not hugely invested. I'll see you later I'll see you later, YouTube. Toodaloo. Bye-bye.